Winners don't build their lives on luck, chance, or dramatic bursts of inspiration. They build it the same way a craftsman builds a masterpiece, with patience, clarity, and unshakable discipline. They start by refusing to negotiate with excuses, because they know every shortcut taken today becomes a burden carried tomorrow. They treat each decision as a small investment in their future identity, understanding that the compound effect of daily choices eventually becomes a fortune or a tragedy. Winners operate with quiet certainty, not noise. They focus on the fundamentals. They cut out what weakens them. And they face hard truths without flinching. They know that the life they build will always reveal the standards they upheld, the habits they maintained, and the character they forged when no one was watching. Building a winner's life isn't glamorous. It's intentional work, done steadily, done honestly, and done with a long-term view that most people never develop. Taking full ownership is the first and most defining mark of someone who is building their life with intention, strength, and long-term clarity. It means accepting with absolute honesty that everything in your life, your results, your habits, your direction, your failures, your progress, is a product of your choices, your discipline, and the standards you uphold. This mindset rejects the comfortable illusion that circumstances or other people determine your future. Instead, it recognizes that while you cannot control everything that happens around you, you hold complete control over how you respond, how you adapt, and what you do next. Ownership removes the excuses that weaken people. It replaces victimhood with power, blame with responsibility, and wishful thinking with practical action. When someone decides to take ownership, they stop waiting for the right moment or the perfect conditions, and they start shaping their life from exactly where they stand, using whatever tools they have, and improving those tools steadily over time. Taking full ownership requires a deep willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It means acknowledging where you've been undisciplined, where you've procrastinated, where you've allowed emotions to dictate outcomes, and where fear has limited your decisions. Instead of protecting your ego, you learn to evaluate yourself honestly, because improvement only starts when illusions end. Ownership doesn't allow you to hide behind stories about unfairness, childhood struggles, lack of support, or past failures. Those may explain your starting point, but they don't excuse your destination. When you take ownership, you treat every obstacle as feedback. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you start asking, "What can I learn from this?" This shift transforms setbacks into strategic information rather than sources of frustration. It strengthens your mental framework and prepares you to handle challenges that others would crumble under. A key part of ownership is understanding that your choices today compound into your future identity. Every disciplined decision builds the muscle of reliability. Every avoided responsibility weakens it. Ownership teaches you that the small actions you dismiss, waking up early, finishing what you started, keeping promises to yourself, doing the hard work even when no one is watching, are the very actions that shape your character. You begin to see that excuses, even small ones, accumulate like debt, and that accountability, even in small amounts, accumulates like wealth. People who embrace ownership don't confuse effort with results, and they don't wait for motivation to act. They rely on habits and standards. They act because it is required, not because it is comfortable. This creates a sense of internal stability that others notice but rarely understand. Ownership also means refusing to outsource responsibility for your emotional state. Instead of expecting others to validate you, encourage you, or save you, you become responsible for your own mental resilience. You manage your reactions, your energy, and your focus. When something goes wrong, you don't default to anger or self-pity. You analyze the situation, identify your role in it, and make adjustments. This gives you control over your direction, because external chaos cannot derail someone who has built internal clarity. People who embrace ownership don't complain about what they cannot control. They invest their time in strengthening the areas they can influence, and over time, this gives them greater command over their circumstances. Taking ownership also reshapes the way you view discipline. Instead of seeing discipline as punishment or restriction, you see it as a tool that protects your goals from your weaker impulses. Ownership makes discipline non-negotiable, because discipline is what reinforces the life you're trying to build. Without ownership, discipline feels forced. With ownership, discipline becomes the natural expression of someone who respects their own mission. You begin to appreciate structure, routine, and daily standards because they shield you from inconsistency. Every day becomes another opportunity to reinforce your identity as someone who follows through. Ownership changes your relationship with other people as well. You no longer rely on them to fix your problems or manage your responsibilities. Instead, your interactions become cleaner and more respectful, because you're not placing burdens on others that belong to you. You communicate more clearly, make fewer excuses, and earn trust through reliability. People with ownership attract opportunities because they prove that they can handle them. They become the person others depend on, not the person who depends on others. This creates a sense of dignity and strength that becomes visible in the way you speak, the way you act, and the way you carry yourself. Ultimately, taking full ownership creates the foundation upon which the rest of your life is built. It is the point where you stop drifting, stop reacting, and stop surrendering your power to circumstances or emotions. It is the moment when you accept that nobody is coming to save you, and that this is not a burden but a gift, because the life you build from that realization is stronger, more intentional, and entirely within your control. Designing your days with intention means rejecting the passive, reactive way most people move through their lives, and choosing instead to operate with clarity, structure, and purpose. It requires seeing each day not as something that happens to you, but as something you actively shape. When someone lives without intention, their time is spent reacting to distractions, impulses, and other people's demands. Their actions lack alignment with their long-term goals, and their progress becomes inconsistent, unpredictable, and often disappointing. But when you design your days with intention, you anchor your life in deliberate choices. You decide what matters, when it matters, and how it should be done. Your schedule starts reflecting your priorities instead of your moods. You begin to control your attention instead of letting your attention control you. This shift may sound simple, but it is one of the most transformative changes a person can make. Designing your days intentionally starts with clarity. You must know what you are working toward, what kind of person you want to become, and what actions are required to move closer to that vision. Without clarity, even hard work becomes scattered. But with clarity, even small efforts gain power because they are aligned with your direction. Once that vision is understood, intention becomes the bridge between your future and your present. You begin selecting tasks, habits, and behaviors that support your identity rather than weaken it. You start treating your time as a resource that must be allocated wisely. And instead of drifting through the day, you use structure to guide your actions. This structure does not kill creativity or freedom. Instead, it protects your energy from chaos, giving you space to focus deeply on what truly matters. A person who designs their day with intention does not wake up and wander into randomness. They begin their morning with a sequence designed to strengthen their mindset, calm their emotions, and prime their discipline. Intentional mornings act as the foundation for the rest of the day. When you start strong, you are far less likely to be thrown off by disruptions. When you start weak, even small challenges feel overwhelming. An intentional morning may involve journaling, planning, training, reading, or simply sitting in quiet reflection. The key is consistency. These routines are not glamorous, but they create internal order. Internal order makes external challenges easier to manage. Throughout the day, intention shows up in how you manage your focus. Most people allow distractions to dictate their productivity. They check their phone at every notification, bounce between tasks without finishing them, and consume information that adds no real value. Intentional people operate differently. They protect their focus by eliminating unnecessary noise, batching tasks, setting boundaries, and dedicating uninterrupted time to deep work. They understand that attention is their most valuable resource, and they treat it with respect. They choose what to focus on instead of allowing the world to choose for them. This single change can double or triple a person's output, not through harder work, but through smarter alignment. Intention is not only about productivity, it is about behavior. When you design your day with intention, you pay attention to who you are becoming through your repeated actions. You examine the habits that drain your energy, the triggers that derail your discipline, and the patterns that sabotage your progress. You replace reactive habits with deliberate ones. You choose what to consume, who to interact with, what conversations to engage in, and what environments to avoid. You understand that your surroundings shape your identity, so you curate your environment with the same care you would give a garden. You remove weeds before they spread. You plant only what you want to harvest. A major part of designing your days intentionally is learning to say no. Without boundaries, your schedule becomes a collection of other people's priorities. Intentional living means you are selective with commitments, protective of your energy, and clear about what you will and will not give your time to. Saying no is not selfish, it is strategic. It ensures that your limited daily capacity is invested in actions that create long-term value. As you practice this, you build a life that reflects your goals rather than everyone else's expectations. Even your evenings become part of your intentional design. Instead of collapsing into distractions, you review your day, reinforce your learning, and prepare for the next morning. This allows your mind to settle, your discipline to reset, and your purpose to stay fresh. Over time, this creates a sense of direction that does not waver with emotion or randomness. Designing your days with intention does not eliminate challenges. Life will still bring interruptions, unpredictability, and setbacks, but intentional living gives you the structure and clarity to adapt without losing momentum. You become less reactive, less overwhelmed, and far more consistent. You move through each day knowing that your actions are contributing to a larger purpose. You stop drifting and start directing. And in the long run, it is this deliberate, daily consistency, not sudden breakthroughs, that builds a life of strength, success, and fulfillment. Cultivating disciplined habits that compound over time is one of the most powerful forces behind a strong and successful life, because discipline turns intention into action and action into identity. People often imagine success as the result of massive, dramatic breakthroughs, but in reality, it is the quiet, repeated behaviors carried out consistently over months and years that shape a person's trajectory. Discipline is not about perfection or intensity. It is about reliability. It is about showing up even when you don't feel like it, even when circumstances are inconvenient, and even when no one is watching. When you cultivate disciplined habits, you build a framework that protects you from your weaker impulses and emotional fluctuations. You create a system that keeps you moving forward slowly but steadily, and over time, the effects compound in ways that are almost impossible to see in the beginning, but impossible to ignore later. Discipline begins with simple, repeatable actions. Waking up at a consistent time, training your body even on the days your mind resists, committing to focused work for a set period, reading instead of scrolling, or choosing a productive task instead of an impulsive one. These small decisions carve grooves in your behavior. At first, they may feel unnatural or forced, but as you repeat them, they become part of your identity. Each completed habit reinforces the belief that you are someone who follows through. And each day you prove that to yourself. Your confidence grows, not the superficial confidence that comes from external validation, but the deep confidence that comes from earning your own respect. The reason disciplined habits are so powerful is because of the way they compound. Just like financial investments grow through interest, Your habits grow through repetition. When you engage in a disciplined behavior every day, the results don't add, they multiply. The person who reads every day becomes exponentially more knowledgeable. The person who trains daily becomes exponentially stronger and more resilient. The person who practices self-control consistently becomes exponentially better at managing their emotions and impulses. The compounding effect cannot be seen in the moment, but it becomes undeniable over the long term. This is why disciplined people seem to leap ahead of others. They accumulate advantages slowly until the gap becomes wide. Discipline also builds mental toughness. Each time you choose discipline over comfort, you strengthen your ability to withstand discomfort. This resilience becomes a critical advantage because life inevitably brings challenges, setbacks, and obstacles. The disciplined person is not shaken by difficulty because they have trained themselves to do hard things voluntarily. They have practiced pushing through resistance. They have built a habit of acting regardless of mood or convenience. This makes them stable, focused, and reliable under pressure while others crumble or retreat. Another key aspect of cultivating disciplined habits is removing unnecessary decision-making. When your habits are established, you no longer waste energy debating whether you should do something. You simply follow the system you've designed. This reduces friction and preserves willpower for more important decisions. Instead of relying on motivation, which fluctuates, you rely on structure, which remains steady. You create routines that guide your actions like rails guiding a train. This streamlines your day, increases your efficiency, and keeps you aligned with your goals without needing constant emotional enthusiasm. Discipline also reshapes your relationship with your goals. Instead of fantasizing about achievements, you focus on the behaviors that make those achievements inevitable. You stop asking when results will come and start focusing on whether you did the work today. This shift from outcome to process is what separates consistent performers from inconsistent dreamers. The disciplined person does not chase excitement. They embrace repetition. They understand that habits build foundations and foundations support everything else. Cultivating disciplined habits also forces you to confront your weaknesses. You quickly discover the excuses you rely on, the habits that derail you, and the emotional triggers that pull you off track. Instead of running from these weaknesses, discipline requires that you observe them closely and gradually overcome them. This creates a stronger, more self-aware version of yourself. You become someone who recognizes patterns, adjusts behavior, and corrects course without collapsing into frustration or self-doubt. Over time, these disciplined habits create momentum. What was once difficult becomes normal. What was once normal becomes effortless. And what was once effortless becomes part of your identity. You no longer have to push yourself to act. You act because it is who you are. This identity-driven discipline is the most sustainable form of growth because it is anchored in self-respect, clarity, and long-term thinking. Ultimately, cultivating disciplined habits that compound over time transforms you from someone who occasionally works hard into someone who consistently operates with purpose. It removes the chaos of inconsistent effort and replaces it with steady progress. It turns daily choices into long-term strength, daily actions into long-term results, and daily discipline into long-term success. Facing uncomfortable truths and eliminating what holds you back is one of the most challenging but necessary steps in building a stronger, more intentional life. It requires a kind of honesty that most people avoid because it forces them to confront the gap between who they are and who they claim to be. Uncomfortable truths expose the habits, behaviors, relationships, and patterns that weaken your potential. They reveal the lies you tell yourself to stay comfortable. They expose the compromises you quietly make that slow down your growth. And while this kind of self-confrontation is painful, it is the only path to real change. Growth demands that you look directly at the parts of your life you usually try to ignore. When you avoid these truths, they control you. When you face them, you regain your power. Facing uncomfortable truths begins with accepting responsibility for your patterns. It means observing your actions without excuses and without emotional fog. You notice where you procrastinate, where you give in to temptation, where you lose control of your emotions, and where you stay stuck because you fear failing or being judged. This level of awareness requires humility. It forces you to acknowledge that some of the limitations in your life are self-created. Maybe you waste time scrolling instead of working. Maybe you surround yourself with individuals who drain your energy instead of elevating it. Maybe you stay in environments that keep you small because leaving would require courage. Whatever the truth is, the moment you face it directly, you gain clarity. You see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. People often avoid uncomfortable truths because the mind works hard to protect the ego. It justifies behaviors with stories like, "I'll do it later," "I'm too tired," or "I'm doing my best." But these stories are comfortable illusions. They make you feel safe while keeping you stuck. When you stop accepting these stories, you break the mental cycle that keeps you limited. You begin asking harder questions. Why am I not disciplined? Why do I keep repeating this pattern? What am I afraid of? Who am I becoming if I continue like this? These questions are uncomfortable, but they uncover the root causes of your stagnation. Once the root is exposed, you can begin the process of eliminating what no longer serves you. Eliminating what holds you back requires decisive action. Sometimes it means cutting out destructive habits that numb your potential. Sometimes it means distancing yourself from negative influences or people who encourage your weaknesses. Other times it means letting go of outdated beliefs you inherited long ago. Beliefs that shape your behavior without you even noticing. The removal process is uncomfortable because it disrupts your familiar patterns. Humans naturally cling to what is familiar, even when it is harmful. But growth requires subtraction before addition. You must create space for strength by removing what weakens you. When you eliminate harmful patterns, you also eliminate distractions that fragment your attention and drain your mental energy. Many people never reach their potential because their days are filled with small distractions that pull them away from meaningful progress. Once you identify these distractions with honesty, you can create boundaries that protect your focus. These boundaries may feel strict at first, but they give you freedom in the long run. Without them, you drift. With them, you build momentum. Facing uncomfortable truths also leads to emotional resilience. When you confront reality instead of escaping from it, your tolerance for discomfort increases. You become less reactive, less fragile, and less easily thrown off by setbacks. This resilience becomes an advantage in every area of life. You stop seeing challenges as threats and start seeing them as information. Instead of hiding from your flaws, you work on them patiently. This creates internal stability. You become grounded, composed, and harder to discourage. Another important effect of confronting truths is the increase in personal integrity. When you admit your weaknesses and actively work to eliminate them, you align your actions with your values. You stop pretending. You stop lying to yourself. And this alignment gives you a sense of calm confidence. You know you are doing the work even when no one sees it. You know you are not running from reality. That alone builds a level of self-respect that cannot be faked or borrowed. Facing uncomfortable truths and removing limiting factors also transforms your long-term direction. Once you develop the courage to deal with reality honestly, you make better decisions. You choose environments that challenge you. You set standards that elevate you. You build habits that strengthen your discipline. You stop holding on to people who drain your purpose. You stop tolerating behaviors that sabotage your identity. Everything becomes clearer because you are no longer hiding from anything. You begin moving toward your potential with a cleaner mind, stronger focus, and sharper awareness. Investing in your character as much as your goals means understanding that who you become matters more than what you achieve. People often fixate on external accomplishments, money, status, recognition, milestones, while neglecting the internal qualities that make those achievements sustainable. But lasting success always comes from character, the discipline to stay consistent, the integrity to do the right thing even when it's inconvenient, the humility to learn, the resilience to endure challenges, and the patience to act with long-term perspective. When you invest in your character, you build a foundation that supports everything you pursue. Without that foundation, goals crumble under pressure, success becomes temporary, and progress stalls the moment circumstances become difficult. Investing in your character begins with an honest assessment of your values. You must decide what principles guide your actions, how you treat others, and what standards you refuse to compromise. Character is not built in dramatic moments, but in small, repeated decisions. It is built in the discipline to keep your word, the restraint to avoid shortcuts, the courage to confront mistakes, and the willingness to take responsibility for your actions. When you prioritize these qualities, you cultivate inner strength that cannot be shaken by praise or criticism. You become someone whose behavior does not fluctuate based on convenience or emotion. This consistency builds trust within yourself and from others. Character also requires humility. It means being open to learning, not pretending you know more than you do, and recognizing that everyone has blind spots. The person who develops humility becomes teachable, open-minded, and adaptable. They don't cling to their ego. They cling to progress. They understand that growth demands dropping pride and embracing feedback. This humility allows you to evolve faster because you stop wasting energy defending your weaknesses and start improving them instead. Humility also strengthens relationships because people trust those who listen more than they speak and who value truth over being right. Another key aspect of character is integrity. Integrity means doing the right thing even when no one knows, no one checks, and no one praises you for it. It means honoring commitments, telling the truth, and acting with sincerity. When you invest in integrity, your actions align with your values. This alignment creates stability. You don't live with internal conflict. You don't carry guilt from hidden shortcuts. You gain clarity because you are not constantly navigating the tension between your public image and your private behavior. Integrity frees mental bandwidth that can be used for creativity, growth, and productivity. It also earns trust, and trust attracts opportunities. People naturally gravitate toward those who are reliable and principled. Resilience is another part of character that requires investment. Life will not move in a straight, predictable line. Challenges, setbacks, failures, and disappointments are inevitable. Character determines whether you retreat or recalibrate. When you invest in resilience, you train yourself to endure discomfort without crumbling. You learn to interpret adversity as a teacher rather than a punishment. You stop expecting an easy path and start preparing yourself to handle the difficult one. This kind of resilience makes you capable of achieving goals that require years of effort. It strengthens your emotional backbone so that stress, uncertainty, and hardship no longer dictate your behavior. Patience is a less glamorous but essential part of character. Many people sabotage their success because they demand results faster than they are earned. They quit too early, rush into poor decisions, or abandon discipline for short-term pleasure. But when you invest in patience, you learn to trust the process. You understand that meaningful goals require time, consistency, and incremental progress. Patience protects you from impulsive behavior that derails your long-term direction. It also helps you remain calm under pressure, make wiser choices, and maintain stability during difficult periods. Self-awareness is another component of character worth cultivating. When you invest in self-awareness, you examine your motivations, emotional triggers, flaws, strengths, and behavioral patterns. You begin understanding why you act the way you do, which gives you the power to change. Without self-awareness, people repeat the same mistakes because they never identify the root cause. With awareness, you become intentional. You adjust your habits, your environment, and your thought patterns. You align your actions with who you want to be rather than who you have been. Investing in character also influences how you pursue your goals. Instead of chasing outcomes that impress others, you choose goals that align with your values, challenge your growth, and contribute to your purpose. You start valuing depth over appearances, substance over showmanship, and long-term fulfillment over momentary gratification. Achievements become expressions of your growth rather than attempts to compensate for insecurity. You no longer need validation because you respect yourself, and self-respect is one of the strongest forms of internal power a person can possess. Ultimately, investing in your character is the most reliable way to build a life that lasts. Skills may open doors, but character determines whether you can stay there. Luck may give you opportunities, but character determines whether you can handle them. Ambition may push you forward, but character ensures you move in the right direction. When your goals rise on the foundation of strong character, they do not collapse under pressure, they expand with it.